In the heart of battle, this canine army dog's final sacrifice saved them all. Shadow, a fearless military German shepherd, has always led the way, sniffing out dangers no human could detect. But when the team ventures deep into enemy territory, Shadow's instincts trigger a deadly sequence of events. In a moment of unimaginable bravery, he risks everything to protect his handler, Sergeant Adam. Now, as the dust settles, the team is left to piece together what happened, and whether Shadow's final act will change the course of their mission forever. The convoy rolled through the barren, lifeless landscape, the engines of the military trucks echoing like distant thunder against the cracked earth. The air felt thick, dry, almost suffocating, and the sharp smell of burnt earth lingered in every breath. There were no birds, no signs of life, just the endless stretch of cracked pavement and the wreckage of buildings that had once been homes. At the rear of the convoy, a German shepherd stood, alert. His body was sleek, powerful, and his fur blended perfectly with the brown and gray of the desolate surroundings. Shadow, the dog, paced back and forth, his nose twitching in the hot air, his ears pricked forward, picked up every sound. Nothing escaped him. The convoy slowed as it reached the briefing point, a half-collapsed structure that had been a local market. Now, it was nothing more than a military outpost, with walls patched together by scrap metal and sandbags. Inside, the soldiers gathered in a tight circle. The hum of communication equipment filled the air, mixing with the sharp scent of sweat and dust. Sergeant Adam stood at the front, his eyes scanning the room, his face tight with focus. He ran a hand through his hair, his mind already in the field, preparing for the next phase of the mission. He wasn't just a handler, he was a partner to Shadow. They had been through countless operations, each one more dangerous than the last. But this one felt different. There was an uneasy tension in the air, an unspoken sense that something wasn't quite right. The commander stood before them, his voice cutting through the silence. "We've received intel on enemy activity in the eastern sector. The area's been rigged with landmines. Your job is simple, clear the path. Shadow will lead." Adam's eyes flicked to Shadow, who was already at attention, his body still but his senses fully alert. The bond between them was unspoken, a silent understanding. They were ready. Together, they had cleared minefields before. They could do it again. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the dust of the ruined city. The soldiers quickly moved to prepare their gear. Adam adjusted Shadow's harness, making sure the sensors were properly placed to detect the mines. Shadow gave a soft whine, his nose twitching in the wind, but he remained still, waiting for the command. The team moved out, the crunch of boots on gravel filling the air. They set off in a tight formation, Shadow leading the way, his nose to the ground, his every step measured. The dry earth beneath them shifted with each footfall, giving the landscape an eerie sense of quiet. The soldiers moved cautiously, their eyes scanning the ground, but their focus was mostly on the dog ahead. After what felt like hours, Shadow stopped, his head lowered, his nose hovering just above the ground. Adam's heart skipped a beat. He knew what that meant. The dog had found something. The team froze, weapons raised, scanning the area. Adam knelt beside Shadow, his fingers brushing lightly over the dirt. There, half buried in the earth, was a landmine, metal gleaming faintly in the midday sun. Adam's breath caught in his throat. They had found the first one. "Clear it," the commander said, his voice low but sharp. Adam nodded. Shadow moved closer, his paws light against the earth, as Adam carefully worked around the device. The air felt heavier now, each moment stretching into eternity. The crackle of distant radios was the only sound, punctuated by the occasional whisper of the wind. Adam's hands shook slightly as he worked, but his focus never wavered. Shadow's presence beside him was a steadying force. He could feel the tension in the dog's body as he waited. Adam felt the heat of the metal under his fingertips and the faint vibration of the ground beneath him. The landmine was dangerous, but it wasn't the only threat. The ground could hold many more, hidden beneath the surface, ready to spring without warning. With a careful twist, Adam disabled the mine. The soft click of success was like a weight lifting from his chest. Shadow barked, his tail wagging once, as if to acknowledge the team's achievement. But there was no time to relax. The mission wasn't over. The team moved forward, Adam and Shadow leading, scanning the ground ahead with renewed caution. The landscape around them stretched out, open and exposed, a place where every step could be their last. The The wind carried the scent of earth and metal, and the ground seemed to shift beneath them with every passing second. Adam couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The air felt heavy, as if it were holding its breath. The farther they moved, the more the silence seemed to close in around them. They hadn't heard the enemy, but that didn't mean they weren't there. And there were still so many minds to clear. As Shadow moved ahead, his eyes scanning the landscape with the intensity of a predator, Adam noticed a slight change in the dog's behavior. Shadow's ears twitched, his body tense, his movements sharper than before. He paused, sniffing the air again, and Adam followed his lead, instinctively reaching for his radio. Something was wrong. Without warning, a sudden explosion ripped through the ground. The shockwave rattled the earth beneath their feet, and the team immediately dropped to the ground, weapons raised. Dust and smoke filled the air, obscuring everything for a moment. Shadow barked, his teeth bared, but he didn't move toward the explosion. Adam's pulse quickened. They were under attack. But from where? The smoke cleared, and Adam's eyes narrowed. Shadow had found something, a hidden danger that no one had seen. It wasn't just landmines anymore. Something else was lurking, waiting to strike. The landscape around them had turned into a labyrinth of crumbled concrete and twisted metal, remnants of a once bustling city now reduced to ash and ruin. The air tasted sharp, tinged with the bitter scent of burned plastic and scorched earth. The ground beneath their boots crunched with every step, broken stone and splintered wood crackling underfoot. Overhead, the sky was a dull, oppressive gray, blocking out any hint of sunlight. The team remained still for a heartbeat, listening. Nothing moved except the faint whistling of the wind through the skeletal remains of the buildings. Yet something felt different. The quiet, once a blessing in the chaos of war, now felt heavy, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Shadow was still at the front, his paws light against the cracked earth, but his head was low, nostrils flaring. He was searching, scanning the wreckage around him, looking for the next sign of danger. Adam watched closely, his hand resting lightly on his weapon, but his focus was on Shadow. He trusted the dog more than anyone else. Shadow's nose twitched, his ears flicked back as if to listen for something in the distance. The dog paused, his body tense, and then he took a slow, deliberate step forward. Adam held his breath, his gaze fixed on the way Shadow moved, each step a careful, calculated action. A low growl rumbled from the dog's throat. Adam's eyes widened. It was too close. A faint glimmer of metal caught Adam's eye, just beyond the reach of Shadow's nose. A landmine, half buried, its edges barely visible in the dirt. It was the kind of trap the enemy had been setting for days, quiet, deadly, and designed to be invisible. The dog had found it before anyone else could have, but now they had to deal with it. "Stay back," Adam ordered, his voice soft but firm. His team instinctively backed away, their eyes never leaving the spot where Shadow stood. Adam crouched down, feeling the heat of the landmine's metal casing radiating through the ground. The smell of rust mixed with the stench of burning plastic and charred wood. The tension in the air was thick, like a storm that hadn't yet broken. Shadow stayed perfectly still, his gaze unwavering. The dog's movements were slow, deliberate, as if he understood the gravity of the situation. Adam knelt beside him, placing a gloved hand gently on Shadow's back. The contact was brief but steadying, a silent exchange between two old friends. "You did good," Adam murmured under his breath, his voice barely audible against the stillness. "We've got this." In the stillness that followed, the sound of the wind howling through the shattered buildings seemed to grow louder. Adam could hear nothing else, just the rush of air, the distant rumble of a collapsing structure, and the faint, constant crackle of radio static. But all of it faded as his fingers worked around the edges of the landmine, carefully disarming it. Each movement was slow and precise, the minutes stretching endlessly. The quiet of the operation felt suffocating, as though the world had paused to watch. Finally, with a sharp twist, the mine was disarmed. The tension in Adam's shoulders released, and he stood, his eyes still fixed on the spot where the device had been. Shadow gave a low whine, as if to check in with his handler, but he didn't move. Adam gave the dog a small smile, his hand brushing the fur on his neck. "Good boy," he whispered. The words felt hollow in the vast emptiness of the ruined city, but they were all he had to offer in that moment. The bond between them was unspoken but undeniable. It had been forged over years of shared danger, moments like this where they both knew what the other was thinking, even without saying a word. There was a brief, quiet break as the team took a moment to breathe. They had avoided disaster, but it was only for the moment. The next threat could be waiting just beyond the next step. Adam closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, letting the silence sink in. In this place, in this chaos, it was easy to forget what peace felt like. But peace didn't come here. They had to make it. Shadow sat close beside Adam, his body still, his nose lifted to the wind as he sniffed the air. The dog's focus was unyielding, his mind alert to everything around them. Adam took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the mission settle once more in his chest. There was no time for rest. They had a job to do. "You're all right," Adam said softly to the dog, reaching down to adjust the harness that kept the explosives detection equipment in place. Shadow turned his head, meeting Adam's gaze with steady eyes, his tail giving a soft wag. In the midst of all the noise, all the chaos, it was moments like this that reminded Adam why they did what they did. No words needed to be exchanged between them. Their trust was absolute, and that was all that mattered. Adam placed his hand on Shadow's head one more time, feeling the warmth of his fur under his fingers. They would finish this mission together, no matter what came next. The wind picked up again, carrying the scent of dirt and something else, something far darker. Adam straightened, his senses sharpening. This city was filled with hidden threats, but he knew they could make it through, step by step, as long as Shadow was by his side. "Let's go," Adam said, his voice steady. Shadow stood up, his body shifting into motion once again. They moved forward, a silent team, the only sound now the crunch of their boots against the broken earth. The danger was still out there, but Adam wasn't afraid. He had his partner with him, his brother in arms, and that was all they needed. The landscape seemed to grow darker with every step. The ruined buildings around them loomed like empty eyes watching their every move. The dust was thick now, clinging to their skin and uniforms, and the air felt heavy with the weight of what had come before and what lay ahead. Shadow, as always, led the way, his head down, his nose working through the dust. But something was different today. His movements weren't as fluid, and his body seemed tense, his legs moving just a bit more carefully than usual. Adam's eyes narrowed. Shadow had never been this cautious before. He slowed his pace, staying close to the dog as they moved deeper into the heart of enemy territory. There was an almost palpable shift in the air, a shift that made Adam's breath catch. His partner, his trusted canine, wasn't acting like himself. Shadow's growls were faint at first, low and guttural, the sound vibrating through the tense silence. His tail was low, his body rigid. The dog's sharp eyes flicked to the left, scanning the ruins, then back to the right. He was sniffing the air more aggressively now, taking in everything around him. Adam felt a knot tighten in his chest, though he wasn't sure why. The team moved past them, unaware of the growing tension that was mounting between Adam and his dog. "Shadow," Adam whispered, lowering his voice. "What is it, boy?" Shadow's ears flattened against his head, and his growls became more insistent. He stopped abruptly, his paws planted firmly on the cracked ground, his nose twitching as he scanned the surroundings once more. The rest of the team moved on ahead, talking quietly amongst themselves. They had their orders, they had their mission, but Adam wasn't so sure anymore. He had trusted Shadow's instincts countless times in the past, and there was something off now, something far more dangerous than anything they had prepared for. "Hold up," Adam called out to the others, his voice sharp but calm. The team halted, looking back at him. Shadow stood still, eyes fixed on something ahead, every muscle in his body tense as though he could feel the ground shifting beneath them. Adam took a step forward, his eyes scanning the area. There was nothing that looked different, nothing that screamed danger, but Shadow had never been wrong before. The dog knew something they didn't. As Adam approached Shadow, the growling stopped. The dog's body was still, his attention fixed straight ahead. Adam squatted down beside him, his fingers brushing through the dirt. There was nothing there, no sign of a mine, no trap, no movement from the shadows, but the air was thick with a sense of impending doom. Something was coming, something terrible, and Shadow knew it. "Stay close," Adam murmured, his hand on Shadow's back. "We're almost through, just a little further." But as the words left his mouth, something changed. Shadow's eyes widened, and before Adam could react, the dog jumped forward, a blur of motion and instinct. Adam barely had time to reach out when, boom, the explosion shook the earth, sending a wave of heat and force through the air. Dust and debris shot up around them, obscuring the landscape. Adam's ears rang, his vision blurred for a split second. He hit the ground hard, his hands scraping against the sharp fragments of broken concrete and stone. The air was thick with smoke and ash, and the sound of crackling and distant rumbling filled his ears. "Shadow!" Adam shouted, his voice choked by the dust and chaos. He pushed himself up, wiping his face with his sleeve, eyes scanning the debris. Where was the dog? Through the haze, Adam saw it, the dark shape of Shadow, sprawled in the dirt, motionless. His heart seemed to stop. His legs felt weak beneath him, but he forced himself to move. He crawled toward the dog, his hands trembling as they reached for the warm but still body. The familiar smell of wet earth and fur mingled with the acrid scent of smoke in the air, and Adam's breath hitched as he desperately checked for a pulse. There was nothing. "Come on, boy, stay with me," Adam whispered, his voice breaking as his fingers pressed against Shadow's chest. His dog, his partner, his brother were still. The team gathered around them, but Adam's eyes never left Shadow's lifeless form. The world around them seemed to blur, as if time had come to a halt. He reached down, pressing harder, trying to feel any sign of life, but there was nothing. He'd failed. They'd all failed, but the dog had saved them. Shadow had thrown himself forward, protecting the team, sacrificing himself for the very people he had been trained to keep safe. The weight of that truth sank deep into Adam's chest. His throat felt tight, his eyes stinging with something he couldn't quite name. The other soldiers remained silent, respecting the bond they knew existed between Adam and his K9 partner. No one spoke, no one moved, but the loss was palpable. Adam sat back, his hand still on Shadow's side, tears mixing with the dirt on his cheeks. "I'm sorry, Shadow," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the ringing in his ears. "I couldn't protect you." The wind picked up again, stirring the ashes of the city around them. The team stood in a quiet, broken circle around Adam and Shadow, the reality of the sacrifice hanging heavily in the air. There was no more mission, no more steps forward, only the silence, the weight of the loss, and the grief that sat in Adam's heart. But through the pain, something else emerged, her deep, unshakable respect. Shadow had given everything for them, and in return, they would remember him as more than just a dog. He was a hero, and Adam would carry that with him every step of the way.